So in the last Green Gamer video, we reviewed Attack of the Petscii Robots. And the surprising thing was the score. You know, it's all based on a scale of 1 to 10, but the numbers didn't quite come out the way, didn't really reflect how I felt about the game. And so I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out a new system by which we can that I can score games in a less subjective way, and still have the numbers be a meaningful representation of how I feel about the game. I'm doing something a little bit different, and that is I'm trying to score games from a new user perspective. So somebody who's never played this game before, also maybe somebody who doesn't have experience on older hardware. I want to take that into account. I'm certainly going to review newer games. I want to be able to take the factor of running something on an older piece of hardware or on emulation. I want that score to reflect some of that as well. So what I originally came up with was something where you have 4 sets of scores, and you had 2 numbers and 2 numbers, 2 sets of 2, and each of those numbers sort of detracted from each other. You averaged them up and you got your average score. The thing is an average score doesn't really tell you much. It doesn't really give you a lot of information about the game. It doesn't really, no matter how you slice it, whether it's 1 to 100 or 1 to 10 or 4 stars or 5 stars or whatever, the average score really isn't that important, and it really isn't that important in this case. The problem was the math didn't work out to represent an average score for new players. It wasn't the average score wasn't representative of how I felt about the game personally, and how how all the numbers added up. So I spent a lot of time. In fact, I wrote just a quick program in Commodore Basic and put it in the Vice emulator where it would generate random numbers between 1 and 10. And I would input those random numbers into a spreadsheet and then play with the formula and try to get something that would work, that would be representative of the games and the things that I wanted into it. I didn't want to have a whole bunch of, I really only wanted to have 4 sets of numbers that I would score this game by. I didn't want to get more than that because then it just gets complicated, and I didn't want to have less than that because then it becomes too subjective. So I felt like 4 was kind of the magic number. Well, when I ran it through my original computation, the numbers didn't work. We knew that from doing the review on Petscii Robots. It didn't reflect enough of the various scores. So I ran those simulations. I ran simulations on ever increasingly complex formulas. I didn't mind that it was complicated. I mean, I could always stick it into a spreadsheet and compute it. The issue became, as I tried out different formulas and tried to do this and that, the numbers still weren't coming out in some of the simulations. So certain sets of numbers became a positive and a negative, and some numbers became between, the scale was between negative 18 and positive 18, and it just didn't work. None of it was working, and the formulas became ever increasing. And I took a step back and I went, the issue really isn't with the formula. I think it's with my English. It's with the words. It's with the metrics. So fun was fine, but playability, some of the other things that where they were negative, where they were supposed to detract from the other, one was supposed to detract from the other. That was the problem. So what I needed was something where I could score it from 1 to 10, and the higher the number for each metric, that was the score. It needed to not. Each number should not detract from the next. Otherwise, we get some really screwy results. What I ended up doing is a far more simple calculation. So what I've got now is we've still got fun, and that's basically my subjective score. Did I really like the game? Was it a lot of fun to play? Understandability, runability, playability, those are the new metrics that replaced some of the other ones. So understandability is how easy was it to just jump into the game and understand what you needed to do. Runability is how easy was it to actually get to the point where you were running the game. Now, for any retro game, maximum score on runability is going to be 8. It's already crippled, because here's the thing. When you're talking about computer systems that are no longer available, you can't just go out. If you're talking about playing on original hardware, you have to go out and source that hardware, and anything that interfaces with that hardware is required to play the game that interfaces with that hardware. Not everybody's going to have. You're still going to be able to get things like the C64. Any hardware that's made for original hardware isn't going to interface with that hardware, and it's also not going to interface with Vice. So you have to do something else. That's going to be a problem. And that's where Petscii Robots. That's where it got its lowest score, because you needed to have not just an old Super Nintendo joystick to play it reliably, but you also needed original hardware, and you needed. Now, from a marketing perspective, that's fine. When we're talking in terms of being able to sell the game, there's plenty of old systems out there. There's plenty of original hardware out there. Marketing this game with this dongle, not really an issue. From David's perspective, that's not the issue. But when we're talking about a new person trying to run it, who, let's say, somebody who's 20 years old, probably doesn't have an original system to run this on, is going to need to do some extra things in order to make the game work, in order to make certain joysticks work, so on and so forth. But that's where I'm getting at when it comes to runability. And then playability sounds like the same thing, except that now that you've got the game up and running, how easy is it to play the game? Do the controls make sense? Are you having to get used to something about the controls? So there's fun, understandability, runability, playability. They're all different metrics, but they're all kind of geared around how easy is this game to get into. Are you going to have fun if you go out and buy it? Is it going to be easy to run? Are you going to be able to get into it? So let's go down the list. We've done 4 games between Gigabytes Technology and the Green Gamer. We've sort of done a playthrough and an unboxing and reviewed the game and things like that. So I just put those 4 into this new metric, and we're gonna run down the list. So let's start with Cosmic Force. Fun, and let's just start with the fun category first. So fun was 7 for Cosmic Force. Very fun game, a bit repeatable, and that brought its score down just a little bit. But the fact that it has 3 different types of play kept the fun, kept the complexity of the game up there beyond just a basic shooter. I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed that game, and it was very fun. So fun. So Petscii Robots, fun. On this scale, I made it a 9. I really, really, really liked this game. It was intricate. It was complex. It kept me. I like to look for secrets. It's the kind of game that I really get into. So Petscii Robots, the fun was a 9. MW Ultra, kind of a side-scrolling platformer, had a good story to it. MW Ultra, I gave that one an 8 out of 10. Planet X2, I'm gonna say I gave it a 10, but let me tell you, I've been sort of intimidated. maybe not intimidated, but Planet X2, I have been sort of, I really want to play this game, but yet I'm worried that it's going to consume me. It's the kind of game, the strategy games, Battlefield strategy games are just I love them. Next to Sandboxes, they're my number 2 favorite game. And to play one on a Commodore 64, I played it a little bit, and it's something that I could be on there. I could really get into. And because it's so different and so unique, nobody's ever done anything like it before. I gave fun a 10 for Planet X2. We haven't done a whole lot with Planet X2. I've showed you how to do it on the Commodore Mini, that type of thing. But yeah, Planet X2 got the maximum fun score. So the next one is understandability. How easy was it to get into the game? So Cosmic Force, I really didn't even read the manual. It's a shooter. You shoot things, okay? So understandability is going to be very high. It's a 9. You're just going to get into it and start playing it, and it's going to be very easy to understand. And you press the button, and you keep pressing the button until all the things on the screen are blown up. So understandability, Cosmic Force scored a 9. Petscii Robots scored an 8. It's a more complicated game, but not really something. I only had to refer back to the manual a couple of times just to answer a couple of quick questions. For the most part, I was able to just kind of feel my way through the controls, get to it, understand it, and get right into the game. So that one scored an 8. MW Ultra scored a 6, and the MW for understandability, it wasn't completely clear right away exactly what I needed to do. I didn't have to refer to the manual really, but there was a map inside the box that was very helpful. I continued to refer back to that. The other thing MW Ultra is it requires a lot of reading, on-screen reading, and it takes you through it very, very easily. But for example, you have to read the storyline and get into it that way. So understandability was scored a little bit lower there. It's a slightly above average, and a high average score. Planet X2 scored a 5, which is about an average score for a game of this type. That's something you're really going to want to read the manual on. You're going to want to understand how to move the tanks, and perhaps individually you may have been able to get into the game without having to do anything, but you're going to want to read the manual thoroughly first and get into and then get into the game so that you understand what to do and where to go and things like that. So Planet X2 did score a 5 there. Runability, Cosmic Force scored an 8 because it's basically you just plug it in and go. Petscii Robots scored a 5, and that was because of the dongle and having to customize the controls for the joystick and so on and so forth, and the complicated keyboard controls as well. The thing is in fairness, I don't think David could have programmed it any other way. I really don't. I don't see how you get all those functions into a standard one-button joystick, or even the joystick that comes with the Mini. Even though the Mini has quite a few more buttons, it's still, you're still going to want that Super Nintendo style pad with all those buttons. Petscii Robots scored a 5 on runability, getting to the point where you can get it to run. MW Ultra was a 7. Again, just a plug in and go for the most part, and just mainly joystick configuring for that. Planet X2 runability was an 8, again, just a plug in and go. Because it plays primarily with the keyboard, there's no joystick configuration, so that scored a little bit higher for runability. Playability, Cosmic Force scored an 8. Petscii Robots also scored an 8 on playability. MW Ultra scored an 8 for playability. Planet X2 scored a 7. All very good scores in terms of playability. The games were playable. The games were once everything was out of the way. No issues, no bugs, no nothing like that. So very, very similar scores for playability. As a result, the average scores, Cosmic Force was an 8, Petscii Robots was 7.5, MW Ultra was 7.25, and Planet X2 was 7.5. Now, again, I say the average scores mean less than the individual scores. I think there's a lot more to be gleaned from those individual scores than the average score for the entire game. And they all scored I enjoyed them. I liked them very much. They were above average in terms of score. Average being 5, and so that's the new scale going forward. It's an easier scale to understand, it's an easier scale to disseminate, and that's what we're going to use going forward. So we've got those 4 on the board. That's kind of our benchmark games. Very different scores, but the averages, they all come out to be very good games. So look for the next review coming up here in a couple of weeks. I'm Mr. Gigabytes. Thanks for watching. There's nothing in here. No, just pretend. All for you.